Welcome to the Gridiron Unfiltered podcast, powered by Recon Sports, the show where we go behind the data and take a deep dive into the world of sports performance. I'm your host, Danny Davis, and get ready to uncover the why and the how behind the numbers with today's guest, Coach James Vint. Coach, how we doing?
Good. How are you today?
Doing good. Excited to have you on here. You and I go way back now, almost 6 years. And when we first connected, I was trying to help coaches have the best data for their play calling, and you were trying to call the best plays. And a lot of fans, when they watch football, they see those big menu cards that the coaches have in front of them and those big play call sheets. Talk to us a little bit about the preparation that goes into building one of those.
Well, everybody wants you to call the touchdown play. And trust me, we all want to call the touchdown play. But a lot of what goes into that is looking at the data to figure out where we can find tendencies, where we can find trends. And then from there, what's the best call that we can have based on what the data says the other team's going to do. And it's, Sun Tzu says that you need to know thyself and you need to know thy opponent. We want to know our opponent. If I know with mathematics certainty that you're going to do this or this, I can make a pretty good play call. If I don't know what you're going to do, I'd have no clue. It's harder to make a good play call. Then you just give it to the fast kid.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And, so many coaches have the gut feeling. They kind of go off of what they see. They go off of their stomach and maybe just the film. What was it about the data, and how did you find success in being able to analyze the play calls to really see what you should be calling on third down come game day?
Well, a big piece of it, and what we found using the Recon dashboard, we were able to take the data and very easily, with a couple of clicks, be able to see very high-level trends and then be able to get more granular into those specific situations. And I'll give you an example. So, and every coach is going to look at data in some way. Some are going to get deeper than others. Like you said, I'm going to call it off my gut feel. That's fine. There's a lot of guys that can do that. I'm not smart enough to do that. My gut's not always right. My gut might tell me one thing and then emotions get involved. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dig into that data. And an example of this was we were playing a team that when it was 1st and 10, and their defense was from the minus 10-yard line to the plus 10-yard line. They were on 1st and 10. They were going to bring a 3 or a 4-man pressure 80% of the time. And they were going to play zone coverage about 80% of the time. When they had you backed up inside your own 10, so you look at that little data set on 1st and 10, they were going to bring a 5 or a 6-man pressure and play man coverage 100% of the time. So if you just looked at the high-level data, you make your play call, you're going to be completely wrong. But we're able to take, field zone data, look at that same situation, and now we said, well, that's going to be a whole different thing. So let's throw a 99-yard touchdown pass. For at the 12-yard line, well, we're probably going to throw either a simple curl flat concept or some zone beater, or we're going to, inside run of some sort. If we're backed up, well, then it's going to be this play call. So I think that helps.
So when you're in the course of a game, did you find yourself ever saying, hey, I need to, what I have on this play card sheet is not getting the job done. I need to pivot some way, form, or fashion. What were some of maybe the tipping points in saying, hey, we might need to try something different going into the second half?
If we have some 3 and outs, sometimes the team you watch on film to prepare for is not the team you're going to play. They're going to get someone back from injury. They're going to have someone who didn't play the week before. They're going to have someone who's going to play out of their mind. They're going to be maybe better than what you thought. Maybe you thought you had an advantage and now you don't. So then you get into the game and things aren't going well. I always revert to 2 things: identity and players. So what's our identity concept? Let's get back to that, the thing that we're supposed to do better than anything else. And then, man, maybe we just need to get this fast guy the ball, or this big guy they can't tackle. But when we're getting some 3 and outs and we're struggling where things haven't gone the way we expected, that's when we're going to sit down and regroup. And I always say you got to have a plan for when the plan don't work. And I always have a little spot on my call sheet for if we're in trouble, what are these things that we just have to get back to? And I've got a little spot for that. And I'll have 2 or 3 or 4 calls there that are, this is what we're going to go to if stuff's not going well. And then we even got another one, the oh crap column. And that's where we cannot move the football against them. And it's going to have maybe a couple trick plays, some misdirection.
Yeah. Now, talk to me about we just talked about scouting your opponent and maybe knowing what they're going to do in certain situations. One of the things that I think you and I really excelled at when we were working together is the self-scout portion of it. And especially when you get later into the season, being able to look back and say, hey, my offense is doing X, Y, and Z in these areas of the fields, and I either need to keep on that or we need to change that in practice this week. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, self-scout is so vital. You have to know yourself. And I looked at it from a couple different perspectives. Sometimes we think that a play, something we're calling is really good because maybe we scored on it once. But when you look at the data, you're like, oh my gosh, that's a terrible play. We're averaging 2.3 yards. We just had one big one. And then sometimes you look at a play, you look at that data and you say, why aren't we running this more, this concept? So that's important. And then to your point, I like to look at, do we have something that we're doing 75% of the time in a certain situation? Like, for example, 3rd and short. One of the things that we realized, so we're looking at the dashboard, it was a playoff game. We were looking at our last 5 games and then, a deal we had played 11 at that point. So we had 2 different breakdowns and we're looking at it. On 3rd and short, from the left hash, we ran boot to the right side 77% of the time. When I say short, 3rd and 3 to 5, 3rd and 1 to 2, we ran power every time. So we said, how about if we run power pass on 3rd and 1 to 2? So let's show power, but let's run power pass because they're doing their homework. And then on the 3rd and 3 to 5, we said, we're running boot. Why don't we just give the ball? We're running boot off a stretch. Maybe let's give the ball here. And that way, we're going to use their preparation against them. So we're going to find those situations where we're real tendency heavy, and then we're going to do whatever complement looks like that, but is going to do something, different.
Yeah. So really, if both teams are preparing the way that they should be, it really comes down to a chess move of one thing that my opponent might think on me, making a certain chess move this way, going off tendency. But you can't know any of that if you're just going off of a gut feeling. If you're not having something in front of you that's giving you a historical trend for you to make decisions off of, that just gives you that much more power and that much more ability to call the right plays in the right situation, which I think you really excelled at because of like what we said of using that data.
You can use your gut feeling when you're better than your opponent, and you can just rely on that. You can use your gut feeling when you're evenly matched. You can even use it when maybe you're overmatched a little bit, but you see certain things. You're going to go with, oh, look, I can see that we have an advantage here. I'm just going to take that. The call sheet becomes really important to keep you focused and in line with what you think is going to work and keep you on path. If I let myself, and again, some guys can just go from the gut and they don't even use a call sheet. Most guys have something in front of them. If it may be small, it may not be real important, but I think it's really a focus tool to be able to stay focused on this is the game plan, this is where we want to attack. And then, as you know, when bullets start flying, when things get crazy, when the emotions start going, you want something where you can take a breath. I've got it right here. I've got the data. They're going to blitz. But now, we were in a situation. We were well prepared. we were playing a defensive coordinator who I had worked with. He knew me. All right, it's 3rd and 8. On 3rd and 8, we had been running some play action Y cross stuff. So we're going, out fake outside zone, and then we're going to bring our Y across. We've done that quite a bit in that situation. And I said we need to do something different, as we game planned. Our coaches, it wasn't just me, it was our coaches. So we were going to run a switch concept. And we had run Y cross earlier in the game, and they defended it. So we came out and we said, let's run the switch. Got our fastest kid matched up on a safety, ran the switch route on play action. We had the absolute look. We said, we got him. Pre-snap, we got him. He knew me. He had prepared. All of a sudden, the safety on the snap starts spinning back and right into where the throw is going to go. We were very lucky. Our quarterback made a perfect throw. Our receiver adjusted the route. Not because we coached. I mean, they kind of did it, and we got lucky. And after the game, I said to him, your kid played that switch route perfect. He goes, I knew you were about to call it. I just knew. Because he said you hadn't done it. We had watched every game, and I know we know what you do. It was a district game. It ended up being for the district championship. And he's I know what you're doing. You're busting tendencies. And it was like, so you're right. Then it really does become kind of that chess match.
Yeah. Interesting. What's your thoughts on some of the new technology let's stick with high school football. Some of the new technology that they're allowed to have on the field and allowed to have on the sidelines. Does that change the way that you call plays at all or adjust your play call during the game or anything like that?
We could not have that in Texas. So we couldn't have the TVs on the sideline and all that. But I have talked to friends that have that, and they said it really makes, in some ways it makes things better because they can see what's going on, but so can your opponent. He said it's only an advantage when your opponent doesn't have it. But it does change things a little bit because you can watch in real time. You can essentially get a great view that you can't necessarily get from the sideline. All of a sudden now you can see your end zone camera or you can see your sideline camera and you get that great view and you can watch it. And the big thing is review with the players, because you remember from your playing days, you bring your players over and you start talking about the series. Hey, what'd you guys see? What'd you get? And they're describing stuff it's just not true. Coach, I had 2 guys on. I had an A gap and a B gap guy. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. You had an A gap guy. You didn't have a B gap guy. No, I know I did.
No, you didn't. Look right here.
And now you have it. So it makes things, I think it helps with your kind of accuracy of what you're seeing. And then some of the tools that teams are using to accumulate data in game is really good. So they can kind of, well, this is what they've done. We've got that on our call sheet, but this is what they're actually doing.
Yeah. No, that's very powerful. And to almost transition to what you're doing today, it's almost like a different style of coaching when you look at your role in success management now. And what are some of the things that you've taken from the coaching world and coaching players to now coaching customers through certain softwares and certain apps? Is there anything that you've really leaned on in your coaching experience to help you in your current role today?
Definitely. When I had this opportunity come up in the technology world, one of the areas, it was interesting when I was going through the interview process. Power BI is a tool I use every day. And they asked if I had experience with Power BI. And I said, boy, do I. And I explained to them the dashboard that you built for us and how we use that to make, informed decisions. And being data driven in the education world is important. And you hear it talked about a lot. We're data driven. We're data focused, whether it's coaching or in the classroom. But a lot of times they don't know really what data to look at. As a coach, I was able to get, like we talked about, get granular with data, find those key data points, and then take actions based on the data to drive an outcome that's desired. That's what I do now is I'm looking at, a Power BI dashboard that maybe has 30,000 data points, and I can see an overall trend, and then I see something and it doesn't look good. So I dig into it a little deeper. And as I get more granular, now we can pinpoint why that's not good. It's not good because of this. Here's this small piece buried, and you have to be able to dig through it, find that little piece, and say, this is it. This is the reason. Here's the action we need to take because of that.
Yeah, I love that story because it really, the data, using data to make decisions just doesn't help you on third down or call the best plays. It really helps you in life. And in the technology world that we're into now, you have to be able to have that skill set of taking a big data set, drilling into it to find key areas of improvement, key strengths. And that doesn't just apply to football, that applies to life. And with Recon Sports, I'm able to see now, working with teams across the country that use performance metrics and other data collecting companies from across the world. One of the things that really stuck out to me that you've shared with me about a year ago now, which is our stat of the week, that 80% of churn rate, if a customer will resign, is driven by whether a user is successfully onboarded within the first 14 days. And I think that's super important. Me running a software company, and I get to see a lot of these companies from across the world handle their support and handle their onboarding differently. Some of them knock it out of the park with fast replies, real support, clear guidance, and others, you got to wait 24 hours to get an AI-generated response, basically telling you to go kick rocks. So what are some of the things that some of the companies that are selling software for performance metrics and things like that, what are some of the things that they can do, like are their best onboarding practices or best support practices that you've seen?
You need to have a roadmap. It's very important. There need to be some expectations laid out. So once your contract is signed, what do you need to do? What does the customer need to do? What does the company need to do? And it may be multifaceted. With the company, you may have an account manager, you may have a success manager, you may have a separate onboarding person, you may have an integrations person that's setting up the API and providing the key and the secret and all that stuff. So you need to have a plan in place so that the customer knows exactly what they need to do, and then what you're going to do. And then we need to have some checklists in place. Has this been done? Yes. Boom. Next step. And I think companies sometimes assume that they are the only vendor that a customer is working with. That customer's working with 30 vendors or 40 vendors or 10 vendors, and they all want access to the customer. The customer maybe is slow to provide something. What is your process for when you don't have what you need to be able to proceed with the onboarding? And then the second area is, how do you get them a fast start? Now, that fast start can come from, how do I get them onboarded and then into the product? So the second aspect of churn is engagement. The longer it takes to engage, the less likely your customer is to use the product. The more frustrated they get in the front end, the less they're going to be using the product on the back end. They're not going to achieve the goals. So when we sit down and we talk to them about why they purchased, what do you want your outcomes to be? What problem are you trying to fix? How are we going to know it's fixed? What metrics are we going to use? And what does the data need to show that that problem has been fixed or that you've achieved what you wanted to achieve? So once we know what they want to achieve and the metrics we want to use, now we can start to guide that implementation. But if they don't get started, they're not going to achieve a metric. So you need to have some, we call it building velocity. We want to build that velocity. So a company needs to have a great onboarding experience for the customer that builds momentum. You get about, the data says 14 days. You want it to be faster than that. Now, some things take longer, huge implementations. might take, I was talking to a guy from a security company. It takes them 6 months to onboard. Whole different deal because they're putting cameras up and building back-end systems. But if you can get someone onboarded for most software applications within 7 to 14 days, you have a shot. And then you can get them in and get them using. And that's where you need a user education experience. How are we going to provide the user the education on how to use this in a way that benefits them? Because not everybody wants the same information, wants to use the software for the same purpose, but we need to teach them. They're not going to use something they don't know how to use.
Right. And if they are using it, and I love having this conversation with you about customer satisfaction, if they are using it and you're hearing you have a lot of negative tickets coming through, that's not always a bad thing. On the flip side of that, if you have no tickets coming through or maybe just some positive ones, that doesn't mean that they're loving it. It's almost a reverse where if they're giving out negative feedback, that means they want it fixed, which means they're using it and they're helping solve a problem.
It means they're engaged, yeah. And if they don't have any tickets, it doesn't mean the life is perfect. And in fact, we did so I went and did a bunch of research on a couple of our product lines, and we're talking about thousands of data points looking at renewals and non-renewals. I'm not telling you that customer satisfaction isn't important. We all want really good CSAT scores. We want our NPS scores to be really good. But when we plotted it, and we plotted renewal, non-renewal based on CSAT, there was no trend. It was all over the place. Because some of the customers that were frustrated were the most engaged with trying to remove the frustration. And some of the customers that seemed really satisfied didn't really use the product the way it was intended, or to achieve, they had a nice experience, but they didn't achieve anything. People buy a product to achieve results, period, end of story. They purchase it based on the perception that they will achieve results. They renew because not only did they achieve results, but they see they don't want the same results next year. They want better results. So they renew because of anticipation of how you're going to build on the outcomes that you gave.
That's very powerful. That's very powerful and good for any company running any sort of software or has any onboarding experience for their customers to know. And now bringing it back to the sports world, in this new era of college football, as I'm thinking about this for my current clients and users, the shift that I've seen now with programs is almost that 14-day onboarding experience with the player. When they come into the building, those first 14 days are going to mean so much and have such a big impact because now they can just hop in the transfer portal whenever they want. If they take them through a solid onboarding process into their organization, they show the love, the support, the resources that they have at their disposal that's going to get them to be that first-round draft pick, or that's going to get them to get the job that they want when they leave that organization. Teams, I think, are really starting to realize how important that is and that these players are not just a number in a herd coming into your organization. They need to be onboarded just as much as a customer needs to be onboarded into a new company, which I think is a different aspect. When I played college football, it was not that way. I got a number and I was fall in line. That was at West Point, which might be a little bit different, but I would think that same mentality and that culture from maybe 20, 30 years ago still applies, where that's not getting the job done today. You need to take them through an experience and show them the love, show them that you're going to grow and there's a game plan for you as an individual when you get to our program.
Yeah, they have to have a plan in place for, hey, when these guys walk through the door, how are we getting them a locker assigned? How are they getting their equipment? How are they getting their shoes? How can we do this seamlessly? From the Army, from West Point, and, when I was at Fort Knox, hurry up and wait. So you get there, you get in line, you're getting your gear, you're getting measured for it. It takes time to go through that. And it wasn't a horrible process. It's that, there are 600 to 800 recruits coming in every day getting gear. It's going to take a little time. When you have, your 30 or 40 new players coming in, they show up. How are you going to align that process to get them into your program. And then with the data and all the work that you're doing on the human performance data, how do we get that initial testing? What does that look like? How are we going to organize our day as a coaching staff? How is the player development coach going to get his time? The position coach needs his time. The coordinator. I mean, you think about the number of people. You're very right. I hadn't even thought of that from the perspective of the college, but yes. And when I coached college, I can tell you that we did not have a great onboarding experience. They came in and, I mean, we were probably not as organized as what we would be today.
Yeah, it's really, and you think about how much activity is going on in those first 2 weeks, and being able to have a system that where maybe you capture some of that data to now see, hey, he's read on this, he's read on that. Here's the game plan for him. Here's who he looked like when we had our first round draft pick. Here's how he compares to his first week, his measurements, his first initial training stats. It's so powerful to be able to capture that data, look back at it longitudinally, instead of just, here's the herd, go through the process, and we'll see you on the other end.
Well, and I think something that you're doing that is really exciting is you're taking, so one of the biggest issues companies have today, and college football programs have today, athletic programs, data silos. So our data is siloed. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a player two players in the weight room. They both play D-line. They both come in, they bench press 295 pounds. All right. They squat 400 pounds. One of them increases his bench press max by 20 pounds, his squat by 30 pounds. The other one only goes up by 10 pounds. Well, he's not working as hard, right? But the other one must be working harder. But because you have a data management system, because you built a dashboard that can pull data in from multiple sources, you look and say, oh, this one's only getting 6.2 hours of sleep. He's only eating, he's eating 3,800 calories a day, but he's only getting 140 grams of protein. The other one that had the gains is getting 225 grams of protein or 300 grams of protein. It's not a work ethic issue. It's a diet issue. Or his father, he had an issue at home. His father got sick. And the coach is going to handle a father getting sick or a nutrition issue much different than an effort issue. So now you treat that effort issue because you didn't have the data point. You didn't have a place to look at all your data. And now you drove that kid away. He's going to get in the transfer portal because he thinks you're a jerk because he's working his tail off. But you treated him like a lazy person. Where if you had looked at all this data, if you had Recon and you were able to say, hey, look, I can see this data. This is why. Or, hey, it's really, his squat isn't going up, not because he's not working hard. He has a hip flexibility issue. So that affects the other. It's the same thing you could see with an officer in the military who maybe is struggling to qualify, with his pistol. And maybe it has nothing to do with technique or breathing. His eyesight isn't very good.
Where are your glasses? Where's your eye pro?
That's right.
Yeah, one of my favorite things that, working with some of the player development directors out there is being able to see a correlation between issues or poor performance to their distance from home. So if a guy has a lot of issues and he lives right down the street, well, maybe it's because he can go home and he has a lot of bad influences from his high school days versus someone that lives across the country, doesn't have a great support system at home, feels isolated. Those two conversations with those two different athletes are going to be completely different. And then on top of that, when you can bring in and you have that engagement of, I know what the player's, who his champion is, where he wants to be in 5 years, what his affirmations are. Now you're able to coach at a completely different level and actually get results and not just bark at an athlete, not just bark at a player, tell him to get back in the herd. You're able to pull him aside, have a real conversation with him, and mean that much more to his overall development, which is awesome to be a part of and really applies to not just sports, within every organization, whether you're a customer, whether you're an employee, whether you're just a friend, right? It's what's going on in that person's life, because it's not just face value. Something's going on. And being able to look at that is extremely powerful.
Well, and for any leader, as a leader, my job is not to use you so I can achieve my dreams. My job as a leader is to find out what your dream is to help you achieve it. Because if I help you achieve your dreams, there's a pretty good chance I'll achieve mine. But if I'm only focused on mine, probably not going to achieve them, and you're definitely not going to achieve yours unless you do it in spite of. And I think when you talk about with the player development directors, and you showed me what, some of these schools are doing when they put that data in the system, if a player is having a hard time, they're struggling, maybe they're far away from home. If I know what their dream is, and I know who their champion is, and I know what their why is, I can bring them in now. And if you were my player, I can look at that data. I can print out his little sheet. And you come in and I say, Danny, it says here that you would like to be the president of all data scientists in the world. But you haven't been putting your data in the system. You've been waking up late. You haven't been going to data class. Are you doing the habits that it's going to take to achieve that? Because I want to help you achieve that. And you say, no. And then I can ask you what is going on. What can we do to support you in that? And here's the big question. I'm going to let you choose. Do you want to change your habit to match your dream? Or do you want to change your dream to align with your habits? Which one would you like? And because I have that data, you now can make an informed, empowered decision. It's not me telling you. You get to choose. But now you're like, dang, coach kind of cares about me enough to hold me accountable and not yell at me. He's having a conversation. And we can say, what do we need to do to support you? But if you don't know who his champion is, you don't know what his junk box is, you don't know what his purpose is, you don't know what he wants to do, all you're going to do is bark. Because it's not about him, it's about you as the coach.
That's right. It's almost funny in a world of just driven by numbers and almost now money with the NIL and coming into college football and the House Act. It's almost like it's driving back to the fundamentals of just who we are as people and making sure that you don't just look at them as a number, as a dollar sign, as a roster spot. You're looking at them as a human individual, and getting back to those core concepts, I think, is going to be really important as we move into this new generation of data, of money, at almost every sports level now. Coach, it was awesome having you on. Where could people go and find some of the cool stuff that you're doing? I know you're on Twitter, you got a couple books, you got speaking conventions. Where could people find you at?
Well, Twitter's X is probably a place. It's just at Coach Vint. That'll jump you off anywhere, but I've got a couple books on Amazon and trying to get more active in LinkedIn now that we're in this business world. I haven't done a lot on there, but then I do end up speaking at some coaching clinics, and some schools have brought me in to talk, and then some coaches, I do some fair bit of traveling to go in and talk to programs about some different things they can do to be more successful, not only with offense and defense, but just with player development and things like that. And
For sure. That's awesome. Well, Coach, thanks again for coming on. That's it for this episode of the Gridiron Unfiltered podcast. Thanks for coming on again, Coach Vint, for sharing both your insights from the sideline and from the success desk. Be sure to subscribe to the Fan Day Nation so you don't miss out on future episodes as we continue to go behind the data and explore what really drives performance. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.